Okay, gang, welcome back to now session 5 of the physical spirits, the awakened self. I'm reading over your homework, and many of you are right exactly where I want you to be. Most of it, the walks, to sum it up, that you took today are just like this one here. I had a tremendously awesome walk around the property where I live here today in Maine. It was like no other walk I've ever taken before. I'm really feeling, seeing, hearing, smelling everything around me so much more enhanced than ever before. As I allowed myself to go into missionless surrender and then the awakening while walking, I really didn't think I could do it walking. I found it amazing to be able to tell the difference. And it goes on and on and on, which is great. I'm delighted because it's up until like yesterday. I didn't think it could really be taught, to tell you the truth. Not in this format anyway, and not in getting you to this point has even amazed me, because literally I was going to be satisfied if I could get you to a point where you are feeling the physical, the spirit, the awakening, but we've gone so much beyond that. Now, just by way of clarification, back in session 2, I pulled out a quote from one of my notebooks from Grandfather where he said to touch with your hands, you feel with your body. Now, the body that Grandfather was referring to was our true self, meaning not just the flesh and everything within, but the entire sphere of consciousness that surrounds us. Many call it the critical edge that have learned it. And that is actually our true self. And Grandfather went further with his term perception. Perception is not just what you see. He said, for instance, feel the sound, feel what you see, feel what you touch, feel what you taste, feel what you smell. In other words, in that context of feel and perception, it's with the entirety of self. And now we're moving into a realm where adding to these classic senses, which you've all discovered as you enter the missionless surrender and get into that point of self-absorption so you can feel that place of the physical spirit, the awakened self. You notice that your senses tend to get heightened, and it's not just externally, but internally. You become part of the whole equation. And now we've added radiance into everything. It's almost a sense in and of itself. Yes, we can use other senses to detect it, such as, your sense of touch, taste, smell, seeing, that kind of thing. But then collectively, especially when it's from that awakened state, it reaches a level of understanding and communication that is expansive and absolutely powerful in many ways. Now, as I described this place, which should eventually become a state, a consciousness, and many of you are working toward that, where you find that when you kind of let go of that missionless surrender and the physical spirit, it lingers and lingers and lingers longer and longer and longer. Eventually, it'll always be part of your consciousness, an equal balance between that which you always were in the way you always used to perceive, but then this new awakened self. And as I said, that physical spirit has a place, an energy, identity, all of its own, so unique compared to anything else. It's a major state of all-knowing, all-aware, including and embracing the power of radiance. You see, like I said last night, and it was in a very important statement where it was similar in a way to what sensing presence does and is, where when you deal with your subconscious, the force, the spirit, basically it's simply breath to surrender to where you need to go. In other words, that place that you go to, whether it is force or spirit or in your subconscious, depends on your point of departure and your need. In other words, your choice to go there. When you get into the place of the sacred silence, and the other term for it is the realm of the shaman, the great void or presence, in order to be there, you must be able to view the flesh, the force, the spirit equally. And you're in that state of presence. And unlike the subconscious, the force and spirit that need inner vision to communicate, dreams, visions, signs, symbols, emotions, and feeling, the sensing of presence is something called sensing. And like Grandfather said, don't try to figure it out. Going back to that first exercise where you had your partner stalk you, you knew they were coming. You could feel their presence increasing with each step, though you didn't know how you were doing it. Leave it at that, because the more you try to figure it out, the more you're going to lose it. So last night, I said, okay, we have this beautiful state of consciousness called the place of the shaman, or presence, the sacred silence. And you can understand why a shaman wants to exist there, because he misses nothing, or she misses nothing. You go into the force, the spirit and flesh are diminished. You go into a spirit, the force and the flesh are diminished. They're still there, but diminished, hushed. What the sacred silence does is make them all equal. So you're not hushing anything. You can't live in your physical state as a shaman, because you'd miss all communications of the force and all communications of the spirit. That being said, where about the temples come in? And the spirit, or temple spirits, that needs something greater to bring that into the fold, to embrace it. So, we bring in now the force spirit. Now, and many of you have experienced this, especially when you say, my God, the sounds, the sights are both external and internal. That internal dimension is your soul, now kicking into the whole equation. So now, in the physical spirit, you're aware of the physical, the subconscious, the force, the spirit, certainly the sacred silence, but now the temples, all together. With that being said, you build a very strong bond of communication, and you begin to communicate and do things in the context of energy and will, rather than the envisioning, as in the empowered spheres, impassioned spheres, envisioning a healing. When you are in that awakened state, it is your passion-driven will that creates what is needed. And realize that when you send out something from the physical spirit, you are hitting all aspects of life. The subconscious, the force, the spirit, the sacred silence, and the temples of the soul, all together. The circle is completed, in other words. And that's when you come into the limitless power of the physical spirit. We got to take a break for 10 minutes to check our systems and get right back together. All right, folks, welcome back. Now, I want to clarify something now, because as it gets later in the program tonight, I don't want it to, be set aside. During the last couple of weeks, I've been a bit under the weather. I've got whatever this illness is I can't get rid of. It's a fever now that's probably run 18 days on and off, and it's just kicking the crap out of me. That and a lot of other crap that I'm having to deal with, and things got away from me a little bit. But basically, you can understand the difficulty in the things that I'm trying to present and teach to you. And when I created this class, I realized that I don't want to do what I did with the ghost talkers and restrict it to, 12 sessions or whatever. It's the way I look at all the application and approaches to the physical spirit. This is one of these things that is going to be ongoing, and it has to be. There's just too much involved. And the one thing I didn't want to do is, put that time limit on it. Plus, there are so many approaches and uses to this, as you can imagine, that I know it's a pain in the butt, but now that you're already registered for the class, you will not see it on our webpage. It may be mentioned on the webpage briefly that session 6 of the Ghost Talkers is going to take place on such and such a date. In fact, I'm going to give you that right now. On December 13th of next month will be session 6 of this class. It runs 5 hours, gang. It's not a 4-hour class. It's 5 hours. And the homework I give you to do is going to take you to it. And that is my only salvation, is that you're going to take and do this homework. But the pain in the butt thing is you have to re-register. Of course, somebody that hasn't taken this first initial 5 days can't get into it. It's that simple. So it's a pain in the ass for you. It's a pain in the ass for the office. But I'm going to tell you something. Some of you are going to drop out, because I have not even gotten in to the scary parts of this yet. I haven't even alluded to it. But you're about to cross the threshold, or you're crossing the threshold into a different dimension. When you start getting into radiance and compound that with the awakened state, the self, you begin to see life around you differently, work or play. You don't take things at physical flesh value anymore. You will see, for instance, lack of auras in people. You'll sense darkness with a lot more detail and sensitivity than you've ever had before. And that can be quite disturbing. It also, when you start going into the probable and possible futures, that will be one of the things we're going to be discussing next section. Part of it in session 6 is going to be a lot more vivid, detailed, and a lot more specific in time. And it can be very upsetting. So this way, by continuing this for as long as it takes until I'm satisfied that this is finished. Like I said, I don't want to do what I did with the ghost talkers. I'm trying to figure out a way to extend it because there's so much more we have to do with that class. But once you drop out, I cannot permit you to get back in again. The reason being, we're going to be so far ahead, you won't understand a damn thing that I'm trying to teach you. So again, the next session is December 13th from 1 to 6. If you miss it for some reason, it'll be in download. But you've got to do the homework. You've got to put in the dirt time. Please. By the time we get back together on the 13th of next month, you should be able to move into that awakened state in a heartbeat and practically live that in a duality of consciousness. And by just doing what I ask you to do, okay? And you'll also have a lot of experience with radiance and detail and intensity and enlightenment and the whole cornucopia of things that is going to come in and into play. I need you to keep that chat room active. Check into it once every 2-3 days just to see how things are going. Put your input into it. We're reading them constantly. If a question erupts, put it in there because I guarantee 20 other people want to ask it. At the end of this, if I get 75 people who stick with it, I'll be a happy camper. A very happy camper. I mean, I look at what happened to The Apprentice. Started with 68, 160 people. Yeah, whatever. And it dwindled down to like 60 or some god-awful figure. And I didn't think it would drop that much. Same with the Keepers of the Wisdom. Went from over 300 to under 100 now. But some people just can't handle it anymore. They lose the fire. They get caught up in other things. And that's fine. That's fine. But this one especially, you can see how difficult it is to teach and to comprehend and to grasp. So this is why it's set up this way. Anyway, that being said, I'm going to bring you now into a little bit different kind of an exercise than you've been doing. Now, basically, and I've kind of done this on purpose, is where last night, especially when you put your hands next to your knee, and I said, first feel your core radiance with your hands, and then shift your consciousness and feel your hands pushing on your core radiance of the knee. And then I had you do them both at once. Okay. Now, then I brought in will. We took an area of injury or pain or whatever else, and I had you just will the radiance out. From, of course, when I say this stuff, you know I'm talking about from the awakened self. And you willed it. And just from the box of results here, my God, you did excellent with it. Better than excellent. Now, let's go into communication, but in a little bit different way than you're used to. You know, a lot of times communication comes in images and feelings and stuff like this. Communication from the awakened self, especially through the conduit of radiance, is a lot more intense. Words come into play a lot of times. You begin to know things and yet not know how you know them, and they prove out in the end. But anyway, just to start this, once again, I'm going to give you a 20-minute exercise. I'm going to have you go outside if you possibly can to do this. You can use the same tree or sapling that you used last night, certainly. I don't want you to use a sympathetic partner. I just want you to do this with a tree, for instance, or it could be a rock or something like that. Now, the mechanism is simple. I first want you to, let's keep it simple and say a tree. I want you to first look at that tree, just the way you would always look at it. Then, through the mechanism of missionless surrender, paying attention to the awakening, meaning the awakened state or the physical spirit, I then want you to feel that core radiance of that tree or sapling, but at the same time, I want you to feel your own core radiance in your hands. Mingle with it. In other words, you're going to feel the core radiance of the tree, but you're also going to feel the radiance that is coming from your hands. At that point where they both begin to fuse together, I want you to surrender. Missionless surrender. I can't say that because you know what you're expecting is a communication, a feeling or something like that. So I'll just say surrender. You're already in that awakened state. But as soon as you feel your radiance signature, your core radiance in your hand, fuse with the core radiance of the tree. And again, some of you might be able to see it as well as feel it and hear it. Surrender. Pay attention to everything that comes back. Words, emotions, feelings, imagery, visions, whatever. The last 5 minutes, write me. Write me about what you felt, the intimacy, the knowledge, the wisdom that you gained. 20 minutes, gang. Okay, gang, welcome back. I wanted to introduce you. It wasn't going to be until Nick's session that I introduced this fusion of your core radiance with that of a tree or another object. But I felt strongly at this point that I wanted to introduce it so that the weeks that were before the next session, we can do several exercises that have a platform starting with just what you did. Now, I'm not going to take time to read these, but you're at that point, that word intimacy comes up a few times as what I'm looking for. It's a knowing, it is a connection, it is becoming part of that tree or whatever you are embracing with that radiance. Remember, it has to be from the awakened state. Now, there's one I'm just looking for here. Oh, I didn't mark it. Oh, here, it's in another one here. This is just a side note, not to do with this. Somebody asked how this is similar maybe to the scout spirit. A scout spirit is an entirely different mechanism. The scout spirit is moving and existing in the entirety of self, meaning the critical edge. That whole entity, ourselves, our flesh, out to that critical edge, is in essence the scout spirit. Now, different than the physical spirit. The physical spirit, as you know, is a place, a separate reality, but closely associated with your physical body, mind, place, and things like that. A very, very different feeling. It's kind of like I said, it's looked at in much the same way as the sensing of presence. You know you can sense something. For instance, your partner stalking you, but you don't know how you're doing it. It's just there, and you know when you get into that state of mind of sensing presence that it can't be explained, but it's felt. And this awakened state is very much the same way, but in a totally different concept. It's an expansion inward as well as outward. Now, a quick exercise I want you to do, kind of a rebounding on this one that you just did. And again, it's going to require, some of you are not going to be able to do this, for you to get outside and to a place where there is a clear piece of ground. Now, basically, it's a very simple exercise. It's not the same that you did for those graduates of advanced tracking and awareness, where you put your hand over the ground and a few inches above and could feel a track beneath the leaves and then subsequently dig down and pick it up. That actually is part of the physical spirit, but there's a lot of other things that come into play there. Tapping into the spirit that moves in and through all things, that kind of thing. Now, what I'm going to have you do is to approach a piece of ground. And I want you, just don't go to one place, but rather do this to several locations. Before you put your hand on the ground, you're going to place your hand on the ground now. Before you do that, I want you to make that conscious shift into the awakening. In other words, the missionless surrender to the sensitivity of self, that shift that occurs. Then, place your hand on the ground, but as you do so, like I'm demonstrating here, sense where your core radiance is and the core radiance of the ground. And as they meet, you're going to pass through the core radiance of the ground, and your core radiance is going to reach into the ground. I want you to feel what is underground. Now, this is really going out there as far as difficulty goes. But as you feel, now that's your core radiance you're feeling with from the place, the awakened place, any object that seems to be the most prominent, the larger, feel the shape of it, the depth of it. Then remove your hands, take a sharp stick or bring a spoon from the house, an old spoon, and dig it up. I want to see if you can pick out an object underground using your core radiance compiled with the awakening. I'm going to have to give you less than 20 minutes for this, gang. Let's say about 16, 17 minutes. Let's do it. Write me back. Welcome back, gang. You know, it almost pisses me off the success that you had with this. I think back to Rick and I and how frustrating this was for us at first. You know, we called it the metal detector, but it's more like a ground-penetrating radar, to tell you the truth. The first one that I read was, I tried this, I got a hit on where something might be under the earth, but when I tried to dig it up, it was way too solid and packed. Give yourself a break. It's probably there. Go out there tomorrow morning with a stick of dynamite and a pickaxe, you know. But the results, you know, found the little round object very fast at a shallow depth I saw. Only difference was the color. Oh, you know, come on. The total lack of doubt, a knowing that it would be there was very noticeable. That tells me you were definitely in your physical spirit, because when it knows something, it's true. One from Michael. This surprised me. I felt in the earth for an object, but I felt was something hollow. I figured it was a false reading, but when I dug down, sure enough, I hit some kind of underground tunnel about 1 inch in diameter. Another one from Jeff, I guess. Felt a circular item and dug up a metal bottle cap like a beer cap. Here's one that I love. Felt a nail but dug up a rock. Redid the area and still kept getting a nail. Heard neighbors' cars' doors and decided to authenticate the nail item tomorrow. What's a dude in his pajamas doing, touching and digging the ground with a knife at 9 p.m. anyway? I thought that was funny. Just imagine it. God, you people are dedicated, that's for sure. Awesome. I couldn't dig it up, but I felt a hard, cold, angular corner. I scraped and dug with a broken 1/4 inch dowel. I used my iPhone for light and seen the corner of an old red brick. I guess from when this was a landfill to build houses. Also, someone honked their horn at me. I guess I looked pretty strange in my front yard. Anyway, you know, got the angle and everything correct. Here's one here that makes kind of laugh. Sandy silt soil, mostly nothing else. However, at one location I sensed a rock pebble about 2 to 3 inches down. When I dug down, I found a small rock about half the size of what I expected. I mean, come on. You're that good at that to pinpoint it to millimeters or fractions of an inch? Here's one here, big success. Felt something long and in a certain direction and depth. Kept digging a bit deeper and gave up to find it, and suddenly found a piece of wood in the exact long shape, direction, and depth. Once you start tapping into radiance, but this is really only going to work truly when it's compounded with the physical spirits, meaning the awakening. Now, that exercise, I mean, it's teaching you to go beyond the radiance of the earth, which is actually in layers and massive, but the one that lies closest to the soil it varies depending on regions, is fairly substantial. But what I wanted you to get to do is to put your hand onto the ground and feel your core radiance penetrate that ground. And I didn't even say expand it out or contract it. I just said feel something. I wanted to see if you fell upon that yourself. Your will can send that personal radiance as deep as you want it. Now, think outside the box. Imagine this on a patient when you're trying to assess a patient's condition. On one hand, you got the patient's core radiance that you can feel or lack thereof. The other is you have your own radiance that you can send into the patient to absolutely assess with pinpoint accuracy a pain or a break or something that is out of place. But I'm almost afraid to say this, that you'll learn that this can be very similar to surgery in a way, where through that radiance you can actually repair damage. Now, I want you to do this simple exercise. I'm going to give you 15 minutes to do it. That's all we can spare, and I need you to write me back. I want you to go back to your knee when you remember we did it the other day where you felt the radiance of your knee and the radiance of your hand, that kind of thing. But now, what I want you to do is to get into the awakened state, meaning the physical spirit. I want you to place your hand, one of your hands, on your knee. And as you do so, feel the core radiance of your hand penetrate into your knee deep. I then want you to target someplace deep within the knee. And I want you to now expand internally the radiance at that place in the center of your knee. In other words, imagine it's midway through or right on top of the thigh bone or just above the kneecap. I want you to pull the radiance out. In other words, make the radiance stronger, not yours. I mean your hand radiance, but the knee radiance. I want you to feel what that feels like. To have the radiance in the center of your knee expanded. Some of you might have a physical reaction to it, meaning a knee jerk, a relaxation. If you have a knee pain, it might vanish and stay vanished for a while, if not forever. But there's two things going on here. That radiance from your hand penetrating into your knee, paying attention to what it feels like, targeting an area in your knee, and then willing an expansion of that core radiance inside the knee. Feel what that feels like. Tom, this is self-healing. Of course it is. It's like, in a way, taking an x-ray, but also empowering the knee and being able to assess the changes when the aura is intensified through will. 15 minutes is all I can give you, gang. Write me back. Okay, gang, welcome back. These are great. From Steve, connected deeply with the knee, spent time probing around with hand radiance for the exact location of pain, then expanded the knee radiance at the location. Knee pain is gone and the knee physically popped. From Ralph, I have had an old knee injury. I have an old injury. I busted a heel on my right foot. Instead of going to the knee, I did the exercise on the heel. I shifted to the physical spirit and placed my hand on the heel. I expanded to the middle of the busted place and willed the expansion. The pain did leave and has not come back yet. This is excellent. I don't want to take any more time to read these, but I want to now draw your attention to something. Up until this point, well, to the point of the earth, when I had you seek something under the earth and I jokingly said metal detector or ground penetrating radar, you think of radiance or a signature, whatever you want to call it, the electrical field, as external. And as you did the first time, you started with your hands, especially coming from the awakening. You can almost feel layers as you got closer and closer and closer and closer to something until there was that very strong core radiance that lies closest to the entity. That's external radiance. As soon as you went into the ground, you then discovered internal radiance. And what I had you do is using yourself. All I wanted you to do is, I didn't care whether you had an injury or not. I wanted you to feel what it felt like to have the internal radiance manipulated and expanded. And I jumped back to the ground. I said, now imagine the ramifications that this has in a healing. For instance, you can go into a patient and either using your own radiance or expanding theirs, you can search for the center of the pain. If it's something like a broken bone or a ligament that has been overstretched or something physical like that, you can actually direct not only your radiance, but the internal radiance of the patient to expand, will it to expand. And I jokingly said it's much like surgery. I watched grandfather once with actually a patient. He was seeing this elderly woman, and her husband had his thumb all bandaged up. And after grandfather took care of this guy's wife, he said, let me see your thumb. He says, well, I got a bad splinter and I can't get it all the way out. I'm waiting, I'm going to soak it and stuff. He says, it's been there for a day. And I watched grandfather take off the bandage, and I could tell. I didn't know what radiance was. I didn't know internal radiance or anything else. And I was standing there with a cup of water in case grandfather needed it to, take care of the splinter area. And I'm looking at it, and grandfather had his hands over it like this, and he put his hands around it, never touched the thumb. And he goes like this. And I watched the end of the splinter start to come out of the thumb. And he went back in and grabbed it and pulled it out, and he said, it's all done, and took the water and dumped it on it, and that was it. It wasn't till years later that I realized what he had done. And as I jokingly said, surgery. But you're going to find, as you stick with this, as we journey forward, that radiance is one of the elements, a key tool in the physical spirit. And like I said, as you saw, your will, but only your will coming from the place of your physical spirit, will create such instantaneous, miraculous healings. It just leaves you stunned sometimes. In fact, I still get stunned with how quickly it worked. Compare that to all the other healing techniques. Whether it's, the empowered sphere, the impassioned sphere, the drawing up energy through you into your hands, down into the patient's body, whatever. This is all replaced by passionate will, driven by, of course, need. But then we're also into this whole realm of stopping looking at things at just face value, flesh and blood. We're starting to look at things in energy. External and internal energy. When you look at internal radiance, what you're talking about is the life force borrowed from the Taoist tradition. And it is also in layers inside the body, as well as outside the body. Now, of course, you can go about feeling the radiance, but in order to manipulate it at its best possible place is only through that physical spirit. Again, Sunday, it's Sunday, right? That date? The 13th of December. 1 to 6 o'clock, it's 5 hours, is going to be our next session. Again, I know it's a pain in the butt. You have to re-register at the office, but this way I can keep the class open-ended. It'll end when it ends, when I can get across all the stuff that I have to get through. Plus, there's a factor in there where you start to look at life differently, causes and effects, and just things don't look the same anymore. And it can be quite frightening. Journeys into the past, into the future, the whole dark side element and so many other things that are involved can get quite disturbing. So it almost gives you a bailout clause. Anyway, I will contact you somewhere about a week to 10 days out, assuming that you've put in some dirt time. I want to add a couple of more exercises to it. But I'm only going to contact the people that have signed up. If you choose not to sign up for session 6, that's up to you. But I'm not going to waste time and everything else getting things out to people who are not going to sign up for it. It's a waste. Anyway, here's what I want you to focus upon. I would say this next week, review your notes. Review them thoroughly. Take time to go through all the exercises in those notes. Repeat them. You can't do them enough because they strengthen that identity, that place of the physical spirit, the awakening, and also the radiance. You see, what I want to have happen is that place of the physical spirit, the energy, the identity, to be the awakened, to become very, very strong. And I want it to a point where it's so strong that moving from your normal consciousness to the awakening becomes will-driven. You don't even think anymore of missionless surrender and touching that shift inside you that occurs. It's just the will. And eventually what I would like to have develop is almost a duality in consciousness, where at the same time you're not only seeing life as you always have, but this other awakened part of yourself is seeing life and experiencing life in a different way. I want you to build on perception from the point of the awakened. In other words, perception, as Grandfather said, feel with your body. Feel the sound. Feel what you see, and so on. So it becomes both internal and external perception from that place of the awakened. And then, of course, without saying, keep pushing the limits of radiance in all of its forms, in all of its moods, both internal and external. If you have a sympathetic partner, they're not feeling well, this becomes a golden opportunity to practice that will and its effect on radiance, and how quickly and effectively they are healed. Dedicate yourself to this, gang. This is not easy. Not easy at all. And as I'd hoped to do, I've built most of the foundation for the physical spirit. As I said, it's like a 3-numbered combination to get into and effectively work with that physical spirit. One is the identification of the physical spirit. The second is radiance. Then the third is will. When we get back together again, we'll do things like going into the past and into the future, but using lingering radiance or forming radiance, dealing with the probable and possible futures. We're going to deal with communication methods and general awareness through that physical spirit, and then begin the process of communicating with all parts of our existence all at once in a perfect balance and harmony, meaning the flesh, the subconscious, the force, the spirit, the sacred silence, and the temples, all together through that physical spirit. My God, folks, pray for the folks that are in France right now with that multiple terrorist attacks. The amount of deaths have already exceeded 100. Realize that it's not staying in France, please. It's going to go to a lot of other places. As I said, this is a bad year, a pivotal year. And it's tipped so fast and furious that it's beyond frightening anymore. Good night.